The movie that many a video game fan had been waiting decades for, especially after the 1993 live-action movie completely dropped the ball, the Super Mario Bros. Movie managed to capture the hearts of both kids and adults alike with its fun plot, faithfulness to the video games, and so many references that even the biggest fans of Mario would have to watch it a second time to notice them all. Critics, however, were less forgiving of the movie because of those same aspects, feeling that it placed fan service over telling a good story. And just to save us all some time, I personally have to side with the audience on this one. Sometimes, pleasing a core fan base and honoring what they love is more important than telling an Oscar-worthy story. And today, I'd like to go over exactly how I felt about this movie and what I believe it did right that many modern animated movies get wrong. And there are going to be spoilers for this movie ahead, so in case you haven't seen it yet and don't want anything ruined, you really should click off this video and come back after you have. I'll be giving out no other spoiler warnings in this video. Okay, so just as a side note before I get started, I've never really been a video game person, but I have played my fair share of Mario games over the years, and am very well acquainted with the lore surrounding the video games. So needless to say, I was able to get most of the video game references, which probably helped my enjoyment of the movie. And on that topic, one thing I want to give praise to before I bring up anything having to do with the plot is its animation style. It's a rather simple but colorful one, and harkens back to the style of the video games perfectly. Seriously, if one were to picture how a Mario movie should look in CGI, this would be it. But that being said, another good thing about this movie is that it doesn't make the same mistake that a lot of other CGI animated movies do. And it's for this reason that I believe critics didn't like it so much. It wasn't like Pixar. I mean, Pixar is great and have told many wonderful stories over the years, don't get me wrong, but as I've already gone over in countless other videos on this channel, unlike so many other animated movies that try so hard to copy Pixar's style of storytelling, and thus become way too mature for its target audience because of that, this movie doesn't do that at all. It accepts that children are the target audience and embraces that instead of being ashamed of it, all the while making sure it isn't too kiddish to the point that adults can't enjoy it either. To put it simply, it doesn't delve headfirst into these big emotional scenes that'll go right over the heads of children or have the characters spend half an hour talking about their feelings. It respects that children are going to be watching this movie and adjusts itself accordingly, unlike what Pixar and so many of its imitators do most of the time. For example, a major theme of the movie is that Mario wants to make his father proud, but it doesn't dedicate half its running time to getting this point across. The problem is set up early on at the dinner scene, is brought up a few more times throughout the movie as an underlying motivation for him to save Luigi, and in the end, after they save Brooklyn, he's told with complete sincerity by his father that he's proud of him. And even though a ton of time hadn't been dedicated to building up to that moment, it still feels completely earned and is liable to tug at the heartstrings because of that. And similarly, when Mario and Donkey Kong are trapped and stewing about the fact that they failed, Mario takes a moment to note that they aren't actually so different, and that all they want is to make their fathers proud. Now, what's my point with all of this? That instead of having the two have a 15-minute conversation where they find out something deeper about themselves and risk boring the audience, it instead cuts right to the chase and only covers what needs to be covered, making sure to spell out what both the characters' goals are so that the children will understand them in no uncertain terms going forward. This is a movie that understands how to talk to children, and most importantly, never becomes too mature or nuanced for them like Pixar often does. Even when it does take a more subtle approach, such as when Luigi has a flashback to being bullied as a kid and Mario protecting him, it's still made obvious what it's saying so that the children can understand what's going on. That Luigi has always depended on Mario to protect him, and that he wishes he could do the same for him. And what also helps is both the fact that this had already been pretty much spelled out in an earlier scene, thus making this one easier to understand, and the fact that it doesn't go on for too long. And once again, all the movie needs are these two scenes to make the moment at the climax where it's Luigi who saves Mario feel extremely fulfilling, because he's finally confronting his fears and returning the favor for all the times Mario saved him. Really, one of the best things about this movie may just be the fact that it's a breezy 90 minutes that doesn't sweat the details because it knows it doesn't have to. And that's honestly one of the biggest problems with Hollywood today. Kids movie or not, most of the films are just way too long. Much longer than they often need to be. But getting more into the movie itself, the decision to have the plot center around Mario trying to rescue Luigi is a rather strange one, I will admit, but it still manages to make it work, particularly because it both serves as the perfect motivation for Mario and allows him to be introduced to the many aspects of the Mushroom Kingdom and beyond. And also, this movie nails the characters. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how to feel about the inclusion of the Khans at first, and yet they were perfect. Cranky Khan managed to be pretty funny, and Donkey Kong himself was the perfect combination of arrogant yet lovable, making it believable that behind his cocky exterior lies a nice guy at heart. And the same goes for Cranky to an extent as well. And the same is even more true for Toad. Because once again, I found myself pretty indifferent to him when his inclusion was announced. But he manages to be so endearing that you can't help but love him. Even if he doesn't end up contributing much to the plot, you still find yourself really glad that he was along for the ride. And as far as our two leads go, all I'll say is that the writers did a perfect job with them, considering the video games didn't really give them much to work with personality-wise, especially when it comes to Mario. But one character I feel wasn't done as well was Princess Peach. Now don't get me wrong, I most definitely didn't expect her to be the damsel in distress that she is in most of the video games. I did expect her to have a more active role than that. But I just felt they took it a little too far in the opposite direction, to the point that she seems almost unrecognizable from her video game counterpart. Particularly the scene where she admits she completed the obstacle course on her first try. It's not the fact that she does it so effortlessly when she's showing Mario how to do it, as she's had years of practice to memorize it and perfect her techniques. It's that she apparently never had an issue doing it that I find unbelievable. I'm sorry, but I would have found that a lot more believable if it took her at least 4 or 5 tries to get it right. And even then, the Princess Peach from the video games would have been way too modest to even admit that. Besides, if she really had struggled on the course just like Mario had, it could have given them something else to relate to each other over. And also, what exactly was her plan at Bowser's wedding? She knows that Bowser will blow up her kingdom if she refuses him, and thus agrees to marry him to prevent that. But then she just suddenly attacks everybody with an ice flower and thinks that'll solve all her problems? Because it's important to note that she had no way of knowing that Mario would come back to help. And that ends up being the only thing that saves her kingdom when that plan predictably fails. I'm sorry, but I just felt that part, or at least what Peach's plan was, could have been done a little better. But speaking of that, there's still one other character that must be mentioned, with that being Bowser. And let me just start by saying, Bowser has always been hands down my favorite character from the video games, so naturally he was a major drawing point of the movie for me. And while I do feel that they overdid his infatuation with Princess Peach a bit, and maybe increased his cruelty from the games a little more than they needed to, I'd still say that on the whole they got the essence of Bowser right. Both threatening and comical, as well as both a respected and feared leader by his minions, this movie ultimately gives the Koopa King the fanfare he deserves. And I honestly think the Bowser from the video games would have loved his portrayal here. Ending aside, obviously. And Jack Black really nailed the voice and mannerisms of the character. Seriously, I had my doubts when he was first announced, but he knocked it right out of the park. And on that topic, another thing this movie does really well is in how it incorporates the elements of the video games into the plot. Of course, what helps is that the humor isn't too meta or self-referential, but even that aside, the movie manages to make the different rules and techniques of the video games into a functioning world and be believable within the plot. In fact, I might even go as far as to say that, other than any scene involving Bowser, my two favorite scenes in the movie might just be the Rainbow Road battle and the scene where Mario and Donkey Kong plow through Bowser's minions using various power-ups. And what makes both those scenes work is that they might be lifted directly from the video games, but are depicted on screen in a cinematic way. In all honesty, that might just be what makes this movie so much better than most other video game adaptations. The fact that it borrows heavily from the video games, but makes sure to translate them so that it works within the medium of filmmaking. But seriously, that Rainbow Road chase was epic. If they made a whole separate movie that was nothing but an extended version of that scene, I would gladly watch it 10 times over. Alright, so to start to wrap this up, while not perfect, the Super Mario Bros. Movie in the end manages to stick the landing infinitely better than its 1993 live-action counterpart did. And that mostly comes down to the fact that it gets the characters right for the most part, had a compelling plot that allowed it to incorporate the various elements of the video games into it, as well as not just directly depicting those elements on screen and instead crafting them to fit a movie's setting, and actually being a kids' movie rather than just pretending to be one. And I do believe that was a major selling point for a lot of people. That this was just a simple, fun movie that doesn't demand anything of the audience or leave them emotionally drained by the time it's over. In the end, it's movies like this that are the reason that films are referred to as entertainment. And despite what the critics had to say on it, I firmly believe that this movie was not only everything it needed to be, but what more kids' movies should strive to be. Okay, that's everything I had to say on that. So now I'd like to hear from all of you. Did you enjoy the Super Mario Bros. Movie? And why do you think it was so successful? And do you believe it deserved that success or not? Whatever you think, please let me know in the comments below. And like always, you don't have to agree with anything I said in this video if you don't want to. You're free to think I was wrong about everything I said if you'd like. And thank you all for watching. It's all greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.